You may have realised that school boards have all sorts of terminology that may be new to you. But are you familiar with them? In this video, we outline many of the terms encountered when acting as a trustee. When assuming responsibilities as a trustee, it can be a challenge to understand all of the terminology being used in the school. And as such, you might not want to appear foolish by asking trivial questions, or worse still, making incorrect assumptions. And as a result, you're not operating at the most efficient level. This video aims to briefly explain some of the terminology that you'll be exposed to while serving on the board, aspects of which are expanded on during other videos in this series. First of all, some schools use Board of Governors, or Board of Directors, or indeed Board of Trustees. And as I've said throughout these videos, I will assume the term trustees, since the term trustee implies you're in a position of trust, as the board is entrusted with supporting the long-term mission and values of the school. Board of Trustees, then, is the overarching group responsible for the school. International schools generally fall into two categories: those that are not-for-profit schools, that may be operating as a legally constituted trust, and which may, or probably not likely to be owned by any one person or organisation, and those that are operated more as a business, which may be known as proprietary schools. Even not-for-profit schools may return a profit, or perhaps better referred to as a surplus, which may be invested to build up the capital in a bank or reinvested into the school infrastructure to renovate or expand facilities. Within both of these types of schools, boards may be composed of members that may be appointed or elected. Again, in some schools, trustees may be selected from the wider community, whereas others may require trustees to be parents within the school, or maybe some combination of these. Basically, the board is a group of individuals that oversees the school business, looks out for the long-term health of the school, and makes the appointment for the head of school. Some schools have an executive committee, or certainly executive positions, which refer to certain key positions with the board that are appointed or elected by the board. These positions will be detailed in the Articles of Association, or maybe the Constitution, whichever document your school has. And while the names may vary slightly, the typical roles are that of Chair, or President, Vice Chair, Secretary, and Treasurer. Quite often, the executive functions hold seniority within the board and are frequently elected or appointed having already gained experience of the school's operations. Some boards operate by having executive committee meetings, but this can also be problematic in terms of transparency if the executive are seen to be making decisions independently without the whole board, but of course it depends on how the board is constituted. On the other hand, committees, or sometimes subcommittees as they may be referred to, are formal working groups that have a specific remit and role to play. Again, terminology may vary, but typically one of the standing committees is a finance committee. A standing committee is one that always exists and may even be specified in the Constitution or the Articles of Association. Other committees typically include maybe policy or planning or facilities or governance. Committees are usually a subset of the board, perhaps with 2 to 4 members, with particular skills or experience in that relevant area. But the committees may also look to co-opt other people with specialist knowledge, not necessarily part of the board, and they may include a broader number of staff to expand on the available opinions, or parents or professionals in that area. It's good practice for a committee to have a terms of reference, which is a summary document that outlines how it is supposed to operate, the scope of its mandate, and how its decisions will be moved forward. These terms of reference may also include an annual calendar of issues that need to be considered, or specific strategic goals that fall under the remit of the committee. In general terms, the committees are where the work of the board takes place and where the detailed discussions lead to proposals being put forward by the committee to the whole board for approval. While the board has the right to reject proposals or ask the committee to go back and reconsider, it's generally seen as inefficient if the board is to repeat the same discussions that should have taken place at the committee level. Ad hoc committees, on the other hand, are committees that may be required from time to perform a certain duty. These may differ from a task force, which may be created for a very specific purpose. So, for example, if the board was considering changing a school uniform, it might push the task to, say, the policy committee, or it may wish to set up an ad hoc committee or a task force that may be composed of board members, students, teachers, parents, to discuss the issues and come up with suggestions. A policy is an overarching principle that documents the school's stance towards particular issues, and in so doing determines decisions and actions taken by the school. Some schools separate policies from procedures, such that the policy is a broad guiding statement that ensures philosophical alignment with the mission and values of the school, while the procedures are the details of exactly how the policy will be implemented in practical terms. Policies and procedures are very important documents for the school, as they will guide the school leadership on how it handles situations, while providing parents and students and staff with a clear set of guidelines and expectations. Typically, the trustees are responsible for setting policy, while the administration and leadership interpret the policies when determining the procedures on how to implement these policies within the school. Oversight of policy and procedure is important for trustees. When things go wrong or there's legal action threatened, usually it's the school's policy that will play a pivotal role. If the policies are incomplete or contradictory, that will create confusion or loopholes that you can be sure will be exploited. As a trustee, you have a fiduciary role to the stakeholders, which includes the school's financial position. The school's budget is a summary of estimated or intended expenditures for the school year, broken down into broad categories such as staffing, educational resources, utilities, etc. The budget shows how the expenses will be covered by the school's income, whether through school fees, grants, or other means of fundraising. An audit is a thorough analysis of the school's accounts to check their accuracy. Audits are conducted by an independent organisation that has specialist accounting knowledge and sophisticated techniques for checking records and looking for any fraudulent activities. The school's business manager or accountant will produce financial statements, which are reports that it provides a summary of the school's financial operations to date. The two most common and important financial statements are the income statement and the balance sheet. The income statement is a statement that lists the revenues coming in from fees and expenses, and therefore the net income through a given period. And the balance sheet is the summary of the financial worth of the school, which is divided into three parts. You've got assets, liabilities, and equity. Assets are anything of value that the school owns, such as vehicles or computers, and can include cash in hand at the bank and money that others owe to the school. Liabilities are the amount owed by the school to others, not necessarily due to be paid out imminently, but may be obligated at some stage in the future. So, for example, the school may be committed to paying rent or orders of books and resources. Equity, then, is the net amount that the school is worth beyond what it owes. It's calculated as the assets less any liabilities. Fiduciary is a term used for someone that holds responsibility for the authority and finances of another. So the trustees have a fiduciary duty to be responsible for the school's finances and compliance with the laws and regulations for the stakeholders. This means that it is your duty to ensure that the school licenses and employment practices, for example, are all within the parameters of the local laws. Strategic planning is the process of determining the school's long-term goals, usually 3 years, but maybe 5 or even 10 years ahead, and then identifying the best approach for achieving those goals. Whereas the action plans are the operational plans set out to implement the strategic plan against the specific objectives. There may only be a handful of strategic goals, which makes it more likely to keep them in focus. These strategic goals will be broken down into smaller chunks with responsibilities, actions, deadlines, etc. in the operational plans. The school may also have a master plan, which is a long-term plan for the development of the buildings and infrastructure with input from architects and stakeholders. Depending on how the board is constituted and the people involved, board discussions may be formal or informal, and there's no hard and fast rules that apply to all schools. Many boards operate on a first-name basis with general consensus as a means of decision-making, whereas others may be far more officious with formal motions that are put to a vote with strict procedures. Some boards may refer to Robert's Rules of Order, which is a traditional set of rules guiding parliamentary discussions and voting, and which provides very useful procedures even if they are very formal. As a newcomer to board deliberations, it may be initially unclear how the board works in practical terms, but if you're unclear, it's your duty to speak up and seek clarity. So, for example, there have been cases where board discussions might appear to be aimed at the experienced trustees that may have historical knowledge of issues at hand. But if that is a discussion that's going to lead to a vote, then it's your duty to ask for clarification or time to review background documents, rather than simply acquiescing to the majority vote. Informal boards may feel easier to work on, but also beware of the potential problems with informality. While majority consensus is fine for some discussion topics, for those issues that are more important to the school, a formal vote is required and should be documented in the minutes as such. It's not uncommon in informal situations and discussions. They go backwards and forwards, and proposals may be put forward that have become confused or ambiguous by the time it comes to the vote, and the wording may seem to change. So if you're unclear, then perhaps other trustees are also unclear, and you have a duty to be clear exactly what's being voted on and to ask for the wording of the motion to be clarified, which should be documented by the secretary before being put to a vote. Discussion can be robust, and that's okay to agree, to disagree and to raise questions and objections. And it's through this process that the wording of the motion is revised. But before something is voted on, it needs to be proposed by somebody and seconded by another. And then voting would typically be, all of those in favour, show your hands, all those against, show your hands, and abstentions. When discussing and reflecting on board issues, whether policies, strategies, or dealing with situations, it's good practice to keep the school's guiding statements in mind and refer to them openly and frequently. The guiding statements usually include a vision statement, which, as the word implies, vision, is often a picture of how the school sees itself in some future position that it's moving towards. Some schools interpret this as the why behind their motivation, to describe the school in aspirational terms. Schools usually have a mission statement, which is more of the what and the how that the vision is going to be achieved, and is more rooted in what's being done currently in moving the school forwards. So, for example, a vision statement might look something like, together we imagine, inspire, and excel so that we can make a difference in our local and global communities. As you can see, this is future-oriented and aspirational. The corresponding mission statement might be, as a diverse international community, we nurture learners through authentic academic and holistic experiences that provide plentiful opportunities for success and personal growth. This statement describes more about the school and the what and the how it's moving from the now to the intended vision of the school. Schools often also articulate their values, beliefs, and perhaps even parameters. Values and beliefs are of course intertwined, so a school may have stated values such as honesty and integrity as character traits that span the whole community, including staff and parents and trustees. These values may of course be stated through beliefs such as, we believe that honesty and personal integrity are fundamental to everything we do. These values and beliefs are important from guiding students and staff and parents and trustees in their interactions, and form foundation for policies and behaviours that are expected around the school, and prospective parents can immediately gain insight into how the school is likely to be seen. So it's easy to see that if, for example, there are values and beliefs around honesty and integrity, then there should be corresponding policies and behavioural guidelines for students on plagiarism and academic honesty. Parameters, or other similar terms, tend to be more specific guidelines to ensure clarity. So, for example, while I think of the USA as being an English-speaking country, it doesn't have an official language. A school therefore may want to specify in the parameters that English is the primary language of instruction, or that it is fully bilingual. So, to what extent do you understand the vocabulary used in your school and board meetings? Are there other terms and concepts that you're still unsure about? How would you go about seeking clarity on those terms so that you're making informed decisions on the board rather than making assumptions or stumbling around in the dark?